Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today we need to talk about some major changes coming to the Edmonton Oilers and changes that could be coming very soon when it comes to signing big time free agents as well as trades that will pretty much have to happen to make the cap work for this Oilers team. But when it comes to Edmonton, what is about to happen, what changes could we see, and what moves will they end up making throughout the rest of the offseason? Watch till the end for all the latest trade rumors and all the latest news. Make sure that subscribe button if you are new. 50% of you guys aren't subscribed, so if you like hockey content, this channel is the place to be. Now, as of right now, the Edmonton Oilers are $2.9 million over the cap, and when you add on Elliotte, that obviously adds a little bit onto that, but considering the Oilers still have to sign players like Ryan McLeod and Kailer Yamamoto, there is a big problem with this Oilers roster, and that's the fact that as of right now, they can't keep everybody. A trade and a move has to happen, and when you consider as well the free agents they're in on, specifically Phil Kessel, which we'll talk about in a second, it really creates a logjam that for this Oilers team they can't really get out of. They're going to have to make a trade, and it probably will end up happening over these next couple of weeks. And for me personally, I think we'll see a couple of players specifically on this Oilers roster get even more involved in trade rumors, but I ended up looking on the Oilers Cap Friendly a couple days ago and seeing their situation and realizing, wait a second, this doesn't seem like it's working and it's gonna work by the time the season starts. And what's even making the situation worse is how much they're into the free agent system right now. And from this article from Jim Parsons of the Hockey Writers, talking about some Oilers trade rumors and Oilers free agency rumors, it makes even less sense in terms of their cap situation, how they're able to get things done. And again, I think we're seeing and kind of pointing towards a trade with this Oilers roster. But as you can see, NHL rumors, Canucks, Oilers, Blackhawks, PK Subban talk. And the second thing that was mentioned was Kessel to the Edmonton Oilers. We mentioned a couple days ago that chatter of Phil Kessel to the Edmonton Oilers has picked up. There is more talk of that idea as the 32 Thoughts podcast crew of Jeff Barrick and Elliotte Friedman brought it up, as did Kurt Levens of the Edmonton Journal. So a lot of smoke towards the fire of Phil Kessel going to Edmonton, and then it says this: Merrick wondered if Kessel might end up with the Oilers, and Friedman considered it an interesting idea. Merrick believes there's no denying he would score there. Meanwhile, Levens writes in his latest 9 Things article, I continue to see smoke around Edmonton and Phil Kessel. There are some interesting things about this much maligned player. He knows how to score, he has 399 NHL regular season markers, and he is durable. Some say his 4.6% shooting percentage, less than half his career average at 10.8, was an aberration, a product of playing on a bad team. Could be, but sometimes it is also an indication that a player just cannot get into the right spots quick enough anymore. Which is it with Kessel? So again, a lot more confirmation that for the Oilers, Phil Kessel is a huge target in free agency, not just from the Edmonton Journal, but again, the 32 Thoughts crew, which is the best in my opinion in the entire NHL, no bias there. But the fact that there's already been so much talk about it, I think leads me to believe that Phil Kessel is a huge target for the Oilers, and considering how late we are into the free agency game, the Oilers could get him for relatively cheap. Not like $1 million or anything, but I could see Kessel maybe even signing for around 3, maybe 2.5 million if they want to go down that low, if this situation continues to stall out, because I feel like Kessel also knows what his value is, wants to get as much as humanly possible, obviously, but I think he wants to win. I think he wants to be back in a position where he's with a winning team and with a great contender, and if the Oilers are going to pick him up, it has to be to a pretty low cap hit. But going back to the actual player at hand here are his stats, and going all the way through Pittsburgh and Arizona. Let's just take a look at the years with the Coyotes, where obviously after he went with Pittsburgh, it was a point per game rate. He ended up going back down to 38 points in 70 games, but in 2021, I thought he was really interesting and a really rejuvenated offensive player, where in 56 games he got 20 goals, 23 assists for 43 points, and then in 2022 he was a much more different offensive player. In 82 games got 8 goals, 44 assists for 52 points, and again that shooting percentage was rather low, but I also think Kessel wasn't trying to be as much of a goal scorer as he used to be, which is interesting considering he got 20 goals in 2021. But you see that assist rate. I mean, when we talk about Phil Kessel, you usually think of him as this amazing goal scorer and this great dual threat guy. But really, over the past years, it's been more of the playmaking that's been the standout in his game. In 2021, he had both the playmaking and the goal scoring. But if the Oilers are going to bring him in, he's going to be used as this playmaking dual threat power play player that, I mean, for the Oilers, they don't need power play options. Their power play is already insane. But just imagining on a power play, you adding Phil Kessel on top of McDavid, Draisaitl, Evander Kane, and all the other players like Nuge on top of things, it would make that power play one of the best, if not the best, to one of the better ones, I think, of all time. I mean, seriously, we're talking about one of the best power play groups we've ever seen, and adding Phil Kessel onto that would just be insanity. But considering how likely a Kessel signing is, I feel like for the Oilers, a trade is inevitable and a pretty sizable one at that. Now, going to this Athletic article from Low Tide, who will the Oilers trade for cap purposes? Is Phil Kessel a viable option? And this article gives us some great info on the Oilers cap situation, what their options are, what we could see with a trade down the line this offseason, which in my opinion is the most important part in this situation. Now, it starts with this. The Edmonton Oilers have a salary cap issue that will need to be addressed soon. The team is currently over the cap by $2.9 million, with 19 of 23 players signed. There is much work to be done, including the signing of 3 restricted free agents, Yamamoto, McLeod, and Benson. I forgot Benson, there you go. Before training camp, the organization will gain some relief when injured players Oscar Klefbom and Mike Smith are placed on LTIR. But the savings, $6.3 million, won't be enough to overcome the deficit of a 23-man roster with everybody signed. Someone has to go. Who should it be? Math has an answer, the Oilers may not agree, and here are the candidates. So again, some really good info there that even though with the Klefbom and Mike Smith eventual LTR placement, they'll still have to get rid of somebody, again, even without a Phil Kessel signing, which just seems inevitable at this point. But considering their whole situation, there are definitely options for the Oilers to trade, and we'll get into that. Jesse Puljujarvi is the most talked about candidate. The organization could move on and sign an available veteran like Phil Kessel to replace him. Puljujarvi recently signed a 1-year deal for $3 million, and cost certainty could help finalize a trade to another NHL team. Assuming there's a club able to take on the entire contract with no money remaining, Edmonton receiving a picker prospect, signing Kessel to a value deal is possible. Is it wise? And you get a little bit of a graph there showing the 5-on-5 goals per 60, the 5-on-5 points per 60, and the power play points per 60. In terms of the 5-on-5 goals per 60, Puljujarvi does edge out, but with Kessel he has more 5-on-5 points per 60, and with Puljujarvi also pretty good in the power play points as well. But you can see still the offensive ability of both players. But Kessel I think would definitely be interesting, and could also I think definitely rejuvenate his goal scoring ability if he is on Edmonton, considering the playmakers that are there too. But it goes on to say Kessel's 5-on-5 shots per 60, 7.2 is in the range of his last 4 seasons, but his shooting percentage 3.88 was the poorest of his NHL career. What's more, his shooting percentage in 2022, 4.6, was also low, meaning in 2 of the last 3 seasons that patented Kessel release went from a strength to a weakness. There is some risk here, and it's worth noting the organization isn't deep in skill right wingers. If Kessel's downbeat continues, the club might be forced into an uncomfortable situation during the season. So I think that is a good point, considering again the Oilers' depth and what they have. Kessel is on the older side of things. I mean, just looking at it now, I mean he's at a rough time. I mean, he's going to be 35 this October, so it's an older player, and there, even though he has this great longevity and has played all these games, there still has been some wear and tear there. But I do still think Kessel will be a solid option through and through. I don't think there's going to be many serious concerns, but I do think Kessel could also have some spurts where that goal scoring might not be there, and considering his shooting percentage, I do think even though it is low and it likely will be higher with Edmonton, especially if he plays with a player like Connor McDavid, I do think some of those shooting percentage issues are still due to his situation and his ability to get in tight into the slot too. That has been a little bit of a problem, and a little bit more of a problem over these last couple of years, but I do think in Edmonton that issue could get alleviated just a bit. Now, Low Tide also mentions a potential war in Foegele Foegele trade. Warren Foegele makes sense as a possible trade exit, but the justification is difficult. He did struggle during the season and playoffs, but his numbers were in a range of expectation for the role he played. Here are the 5-on-5 totals away from skilled centers McDavid and Draisaitl. So you see, without McDavid and Draisaitl, he was actually much better in the 5-on-5 goals per 60, and especially without Connor McDavid, actually played pretty well, all things considered. So you get some justification on that Foegele trade, but he makes 2.75 for the next 2 seasons. But I do think for Foegele, even though he's a little bit of an overpay, he still does play that middle six role quite decently. And again, going into spending most of his time with Nugent Hopkins and some of that. And then we go on to Tyson Barrie, which I think in my personal opinion is the option the Oilers should be looking at the most in a potential trade. Tyson Barrie is often mentioned as a possible trade asset, with the Oilers having a defenseman with duplicate skills, Evan Bouchard, establishing himself as an NHL player. Is Bouchard at a point where the Oilers could consider him a superior option, thus making a $4.5 million per season defender like Barrie a luxury on the third pairing? Woodcroft and assistant coach Dave Manson arrived in Edmonton to take over the club, and again going over some of the fits and some of the lines that they ended up going at, and talking about how Barrie was kind of a little bit phased out, especially again with Bouchard's emergence. And I feel like that is the biggest reason why Barrie should be gone. I mean, considering again that $4.5 million cap hit, let me just check what he makes per or how many years he has. So he has this year and next at $4.5 million, and that is a huge chunk of change considering how, even though Barrie has been a valuable part of the Oilers team since he signed there, he hasn't been this irreplaceable guy. And I think Tyson Barrie is a great example of an offensive defenseman that you can get rid of and still kind of find some of that within the system. And the Oilers have the perfect situation with Evan Bouchard coming up and with his offensive skills already showing form and already being at a pretty consistent rate, and in the playoffs also playing pretty well. That's the perfect situation for the Oilers to be in, and I think that's exactly why we will end up seeing Barrie likely traded at some point this offseason, maybe by the time around training camp begins. I feel like Barrie makes a lot of sense. The only problem is that he makes maybe too much money. I mean, getting rid of $4.5 million of cap in this economy is a really rough situation to be in. So for Edmonton, they might not get nearly as much as they would have usually, but I still do think Tyson Barrie does command quite a bit of value, and I think for the Oilers it makes way too much sense with Bouchard filling into the role, and also players like Philip Broberg wanting to get time this next year. I think Tyson Barrie, it doesn't really make sense even if he was at a lower cap hit, but considering he makes 4.5 for this year and next, if you were able to get rid of him, that would solve, I think, most of the cap issues, especially for this year. You'd be able to sign McLeod and Yamamoto, be able to be under the cap, and you might also be able to sign Kessel. You might have to get rid of something else on top of that, but trading Barrie just to make the cap hit work, I think, is the most likely situation, especially with how much they've shot Puljujarvi and how we've heard reports that they haven't really gotten as much in the returns and the trade offers that they would like to see a trade done. But I feel like Barrie, if they're going to make him widely available, would be able to get some value, but still not as much as he probably should have considering the cap situation. But again, you look at Tyson Barrie, he's 31 years old, and this last year in 73 games got 7 goals, 34 assists for 41 points. I mean, obviously getting rid of him will be a big blow on that offense and on that power play, but I do think, again, Evan Bouchard makes his role replaceable. And you consider his time in Edmonton in 56 games in 2021, got 8 goals, 40 assists, 48 points, and again, the rate that he got this last year, 41 points in 73 games. It wouldn't make sense why the Oilers wouldn't have Barrie as their first choice to trade, because overall, I mean, he's fit pretty well into that offense, but I do think considering the younger options they have, the Oilers are in a position where they need to consider the younger and cheaper options, and Bouchard could be in a bigger role next year, and I think, again, that kind of phases out Barrie's role just a little bit there. And considering, again, the cap situation, it's one of those situations where the Oilers would want to keep him, they'd want to keep that guy around, but it's a business and it's a cap world, and considering that $4.5 million cap hit, if you want to bring in Kessel, if you want to bring in all these guys and keep everybody together, especially a player like Ryan McLeod, Barrie, I think, needs to be gone, and especially for next year's cap hit in 2024, he has that, again, that multi-year deal. I think getting rid of that $4.5 million is critical to this Oilers team, and I think Barrie trade is pretty much inevitable. Now, if you want a team that I think could actually trade for him, maybe Phil Kessel's former team in the Arizona Coyotes. They got $23 million of cap space, and I feel like one of these destinations, one of these teams that is in a rebuilding mode that just wants an offense and defenseman to lead a power play, feed some of the young guys, and be a good character guy will be the team to end up trading for him. Again, getting rid of $4.5 million of cap space is not easy, but I think one of the teams like Arizona that has the most cap space will be one of the teams that gets the deal done. But a lot is going to happen with this Oilers team, and a lot is going to change over these next couple of months. But let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about the Oilers situation. Who do you think they should get rid of? Should it be Tyson Barrie? Should it be Puljujarvi? Should it be Warren Foegele? And do you think they should sign Phil Kessel? How do you think he'd fit? How many points do you think he will get? Let me know your thoughts down below on everything. Of course, share this video with your friends. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and click on this card for all my trading room content right in one playlist. My name is Nathan. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.